this is a fascinating bracket. We broke down some of the more interesting matchups, some of the like a Bill Self, John Calipari matchup in round 1 with the winner possibly playing Rick Pitino. What was the one you looked at and you know, first round game that you looked at and you're like, I have to watch this. I will be planted in front of my television when I see when this starts.
Yeah, there were quite a few. I mean, that one that you just mentioned, the Arkansas, Kansas, which then leads into Rick Pitino. I mean, that's a huge one right there, kind of setting up two big coaches. We know that coaches are usually the stars of college basketball. At least they have been throughout the history of the sport. And these are two that are as big as it gets. And then, like I said, it feeds into facing another Hall of Fame coach in Rick Pitino. So that one was way up there for me. One that I'm really, really interested in, though, is Missouri against Drake. You got this lineup here where Missouri has looked good at times in the SEC. Obviously, they get a 6 seed here, but Drake 30-3. So they've got one of the best records in all of college basketball. They're led by, of course, Coach McCollum there, who just brought several players from the D2 ranks up into Division I. And a lot of people question how successful that would be. It has been very successful. And I would warn people, though, when you talk about this team, when you start referencing that they're D2 players playing at the D1 level, Bennett Sturtz is not that anymore. He might have been last year, but this is a guy who is now on NBA radars with how good he's performed all through the season.
Drake made the tournament, but Lamar didn't. So does that mean that Drake won the beef? Did you guys think about that?
I mean, you know, if you're playing the long game, you're playing the long game. He might have.
I was wondering where you're going with that, but no.
Andy,
they're
I
still
gotta
not
ask
like
this.
us.
You asked
they're still not like
questions.
us. Go for it.
Can you just help me win some bets? Like, who's like when you look at teams that are, because listen, Andy, most of the people listening to the show are like me, right? Like they don't need to know about the Drake too deep there or with the rotation, but they want to know, like, what long shots to you do you think are underseeded or undervalued in terms of the odds? Like, who do you think could make a run based on their paths and based on their betting number?
Yeah, so you look at those first round upsets that you're going to want to pick. The 5-12 is always the way to go there, and there's plenty of really good candidates this season. We've got, of course, Colorado State playing Memphis. Colorado State's favored in that game, actually. So I don't know if that one's even your typical underdog that you're talking about, but you've got UC San Diego against Michigan's going to be a really good game. Liberty and Oregon is another one. And then, of course, McNeese against Clemson. You got Will Wade, who's right on the cusp. He's got that show cause is gone, and now he can take a big job in this upcoming cycle. So maybe they pull off a big win against Clemson, who he has ties with that program. That'd be a real storyline win for them, and would probably make some people quite a bit of money if they had money on it. In terms of those runs through the tournament, though, I struggle because I really do think that the top 5-6 teams in college basketball have separated themselves at this point. So I don't know if you're going to get great money picking a national champion.
But like the one that stands out to me, and you know, we talked about it a little bit on at the beginning of this interview, but like is St. John's and Rick Pitino. If you look at that 32-1, you know, I've watched this tournament enough to know that runs like that happen a lot. Like, I'm not going to act like I know, you know, that St. John's brings something to the table from a actual like analysis standpoint to actually make that run. But from a storyline perspective and from the pedigree of the coach perspective, 32-1 seems like a pretty juicy number for somebody that's been that successful in this tournament.
Yeah, not just in this tournament, but this season. St. John's is right up there with the elite teams in terms of their record overall and what they've been able to do recently. They have gone on a tear and have kind of just run over the Big East throughout the last month or so. So St. John's is definitely one to pick there if you're going for a long shot. I don't.
They
really
just have a
really
tough second round game, which I think is why their odds are so out of whack.
Right, and I'm not sure why they're even that low though, because you look at an Iowa State, well, they're down a player, so I'm not sure if they should be higher up in those odds. Texas Tech also listed higher than them, but Darian Williams is not 100%. So that's one of their best players who's not playing at peak performance. Some of these other teams, obviously, they got to go through each other. So I think St. John's is really the way to go there if you're looking for a long shot on this list.
So, James, you mentioned you feel like the top teams have separated themselves, but what feels different about this tournament than last year's? Last year, it felt like the UConn Invitational. Everybody's just waiting for UConn to smash everybody. Nobody really felt like anybody else had a chance. So who in your mind are the ones, the 2, 3, 4 that should be the favorites in this thing.
Yeah, I mean, we look at Auburn, who had this incredible run, built up their resume, and really just was so far ahead of the field by the time we got into March that they were going to be the number 1 seed no matter what happened. And of course, we know what happened was they lost 3 out of 4 matchups down the stretch. And so that has a lot of people really starting to question their pedigree. And I can't blame them because, like you said, a lot of people kind of show up to this around March. And so what they've seen from Auburn is not what us college basketball analysts have been talking about with this dominant team. And so the question for Auburn is, were they just disinterested? Did they know that they were so far ahead of the field that they didn't have anything to play for? Or is there some real problems that they have to address? I think that's opened the door wide open for Duke and Florida. I think those are 2 teams that you have to watch out for. Duke has the best player in the country in Cooper Flagg. Florida, I think, is the best all-around team in the country. They've got the top-end talent with Walter Clayton. They've got an incredible starting lineup filled with guys who can provide all kinds of scoring output, defensive impact, and then they've got the depth. They bring 2, 3, 4 guys off the bench who can make a real impact in games as well. So they really are the complete package, and I think this Auburn little run of form has opened the door for those 2 to really make a run at this thing.
Anybody who's been watching White Lotus this season knows that Duke's taken a few L's in this. I don't know. I don't know if you're. But like,
no spoilers. I haven't seen the most recent episode yet. And this show is sponsored by Rhoback. As you can see, I'm wearing my Rhoback Performance hoodie. Working down here in the Keys. Works pretty much anywhere you want to go. This is great for me when I go fishing, but pretty much anywhere else. The bar, the golf course. You name it, it's the perfect weight when it's not cold, when it's not super hot, when you're in the between times, it's absolutely perfect. But of course, Rhoback has a lot of other incredible items. The new Huddle hoodie for when it's chilly, and I know there's still some chilly days left. I'm telling you, it's like wearing the most comfortable bedding that you've ever had, that you've ever snuggled up under. So the Huddle hoodie, you got to get. The Performance hoodie, you got to get. And you can get them all now and get a bunch of them at Rhoback. Use the code Andy for 20% off your first purchase. That's RHOBACK.com. 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 Use the code Andy for 20% off your first purchase. I fell asleep last night.
I'm surprised you haven't seen that meme floating around Twitter. You're going to see it a lot, I think, if Duke loses. But can you contextualize, because Cooper Flagg is the biggest name, the anticipation is that he's probably going to play. But how good is Duke with Flagg not playing or at 50%?
Without Flagg, I think that they're still definitely good enough to win that first round game. The 1-16 matchup. Look, you go beyond Cooper Flagg, and this is still one of the best teams in college basketball. You've got Cone Knippel, who's going to be a lottery pick in the NBA draft. So will Kaman Malawak. He'll be up there towards the top of the first round. You then look at veteran college players like Tyrese Proctor, Sion James. So they've got plenty of depth to get through this first round game. It gets a little bit more interesting. You get into that second round, particularly, I think, if they play a Mississippi State team that really wants to kind of grind it out and has faced the rigors of the SEC schedule. We know, obviously, 14 teams in the tournament. They've been playing tough teams night in, night out. They've gotten results every now and then. So I think really you need Cooper Flagg to be close to 100% for that second round game. You definitely need him going into the second weekend where the level of competition just ramps so much higher up.
Well, and it's interesting that you mentioned that, because if Cooper Flagg is limited in that second round game, Duke is vulnerable there. Who's the most vulnerable of the 1 seeds going into the 8-9 game?
I think it's actually Auburn, for those reasons that Auburn has lost 3 of 4, and that's a real concern. I know that, yes, you can come up with a million different excuses for why that could be the case, and that might be legitimate reasons. But I think facing either a Creighton, who has one of the best defensive players in the country in Ryan Kalkbrenner, or Louisville, who has an elite defensive player of their own in Chucky Hepburn. Obviously, Kalkbrenner in the paint, Hepburn on the perimeter, but those are 2 different teams that have been playing really well, got to the championship of their conference tournaments, and so you could really look up and see Auburn in a dogfight here. I think it's going to be a real indicator too for what they're going to do. If they blow out this team in the second round, I think we know that Auburn is back, that it was just a little blip on their schedule, and that they're at full force, ready to go to the Final Four. If it's a close game, watch out, because they have a tough matchup in that next round as well.